31 missed calls lit up my phone that morning, all from my son, Henry, the same son who told me 3 days earlier that I wasn't welcome at our family Christmas Eve dinner. The Rolls-Royce I had gifted him for his 40th birthday, gone from his driveway, and the keys back in my possession. Funny how quickly forever becomes for now when money enters the equation. Before we dive in, please tap that like button, consider subscribing, and tell me in the comments where you're watching from tonight. It was December 20th when my phone rang, and I saw Henry's name on the screen. You know, there was a time when seeing my son's name would make me smile instantly. These days, I found myself hesitating before answering, wondering what crisis needed my checkbook this time. But I'm his father, so I picked up anyway. "Hey, Dad," he started, and right away I could hear that tone. You know the one, like he was about to ask me to understand something I definitely wouldn't understand. Amanda and I have been talking about Christmas Eve. Now, I should mention that Christmas Eve had been our family tradition for 42 years, ever since Henry was 3 years old, and Martha, my late wife, insisted we needed something special just for us. "We're thinking this year we want to keep things more intimate," Henry continued, and I could practically hear him reading from a script Amanda had written for him. Just immediate family, you know, to start some new traditions with the kids. I actually had to stop and replay that sentence in my head. Did my son just say immediate family to me, his father? "But I am an immediate family member, Henry. I'm your father," I said, trying to keep my voice steady, even though something cold was settling in my chest. There was this pause, this awful pause where I could hear him breathing, probably looking at Amanda for his next line. "Well, Dad, Amanda's parents are coming, and with them and the kids, the dining room is already pretty full. We thought you might be more comfortable coming for lunch on Christmas Day instead. Maybe around 2? More comfortable." Those 2 words echoed in my head like a bad joke. More comfortable being demoted from the Christmas Eve dinner I'd hosted for 4 decades to a lunch slot the next day, like some distant relative they felt obligated to feed. I thought about all those years Martha and I had spent preparing for Christmas Eve. How she'd start planning the menu in October. How she'd make me test everything 3 times because it had to be perfect for our family. Even after she passed 5 years ago, I kept making her recipes, following her handwritten notes in that old recipe book with the coffee stains and flour fingerprints. The kids always said nobody could make Christmas dinner like Grandma, except for Grandpa. "Dad, are you still there?" Henry's voice pulled me back. "Yeah, I'm here," I said, though honestly, I wasn't sure where here was anymore. "Look, we just think it would be easier this way. Amanda's parents are getting older, and they're used to certain traditions. Certain traditions. Not our traditions. Not the ones where Henry used to help me string lights while Martha baked. Not the ones where we'd stay up until midnight playing cards and laughing about old stories. No, certain traditions that apparently didn't include the man who'd paid for Henry's college, his first car, his down payment on that house, where I was no longer welcome for Christmas Eve. Besides, Dad," Henry added, and this is the part that really got me, "you don't even drive much anymore. Wouldn't it be easier for you to come during the day when it's not dark? I'm 68 years old, not 98. I still drive to the grocery store, the bank, the cemetery every Sunday to visit Martha, but suddenly I'm too old to drive the 15 minutes to my son's house for Christmas Eve?" The truth started settling in like winter frost on a window. This wasn't about space or traditions or my driving. This was about slowly pushing me to the edges of the family photo until one day I wouldn't be in it at all. "Is this Amanda's idea?" I asked, and immediately regretted it. Not because it wasn't true, but because I knew it would make things worse. "Dad, come on. Don't make this about Amanda. We made this decision together. Together. Right. The same way they decided together that I didn't need to know about Sophie's recital last month until after it happened, or that they were refinancing the house I'd helped them buy. You know what, son? That's fine. You have your intimate Christmas Eve with Amanda's parents. I'll see you on Christmas Day at 2. I hung up before he could respond, before he could throw in some fake reassurance about how much they still wanted to see me. I sat in my living room for a long time after that call, looking at the Christmas tree I'd already decorated. Martha always said I went overboard with the lights, but she'd smile when she said it. On the mantel sat our family photo from last Christmas Eve, everyone gathered around the dinner table, Henry raising a glass for a toast. I remembered that toast. He'd thanked me for keeping Mom's traditions alive, for being the glue that held the family together. 1 year later, apparently that glue wasn't strong enough to earn me a seat at the table. I picked up Martha's recipe book from the kitchen counter, ran my fingers over her handwriting. She'd written little notes in the margins like, "Victor loves extra sage," and "Henry always asks for seconds." I wondered if Amanda's parents' traditions included any notes about my son. That night, I couldn't shake the feeling that I'd been rehearsing for a play where they'd suddenly changed my part from leading man to extra. Maybe I should have seen it coming. The forgotten Father's Day, the birthday card that arrived 3 days late, the way Amanda always seemed to have somewhere else to look when I was talking. But you know what really hurts? It wasn't being uninvited. It was how easy it seemed for Henry to do it. No struggle in his voice. No, "I wish there was another way, Dad." Just a casual restructuring of 42 years of tradition, like he was rearranging furniture. I walked to my kitchen counter, picked up the keys to the Rolls-Royce, held them up to the light. They gleamed like a promise, like power, like something that was still mine. The metal was cold in my hand, but somehow, holding those keys made me feel warm for the first time since that phone call. The keys caught the light from Martha's old lamp, the one she'd bought at that antique store on our 20th anniversary, throwing little rainbows on the wall. Standing there in my kitchen, I realized something. If I was being written out of the family script, maybe it was time to remind them who'd been funding the production all along. The Rolls-Royce Ghost. $350,000 of pristine British engineering sitting in my garage. I bought it for Henry 2 years ago on his 40th birthday. Probably the most extravagant thing I'd ever done in my life. Martha would have had opinions about spending that much on a car, but she wasn't there to talk sense into me, and I wanted to do something that would show Henry how proud I was of him. Or maybe, if I'm being honest with myself, I wanted to buy something that would make me impossible to forget. Funny how that worked out, isn't it? The morning after the uninvitation call, I found myself standing in my garage, staring at the spare key to the Rolls-Royce that I'd kept, just in case of emergencies. I remembered the day I gave it to him like it was yesterday. Henry's face when he saw it in his driveway with that giant red bow, the way his hands shook when he touched the hood, the tears in his eyes when he hugged me. "Dad, this is too much," he'd said. "Nothing's too much for my son," I'd replied, meaning every word. He promised me that day. His exact words were, "This will stay in our family forever, Dad. My kids' kids will know their grandfather bought this." Forever apparently meant 2 years, because last week my friend Anthony, who owns the luxury car dealership in town, called me with some interesting news. "Victor," he said, "I thought you should know Henry came by asking about trade in values for the Ghost." Trade in values. For the car that was supposed to stay in the family forever. Anthony told me Henry seemed desperate, kept asking about private buyers, quick sales, cash deals. He said he needed something more practical, Anthony explained, and I could hear the confusion in his voice because what's more practical than having a fully paid-off Rolls-Royce? Unless, of course, you need the money more than you need the memory. I did some checking after that, made some calls to people who know people. Turns out Henry and Amanda had been looking at vacation properties, specifically a beach house that required a hefty down payment. The kind of down payment you could get from selling a Rolls-Royce Ghost. Here's the thing about that car, though, and this is where it gets interesting. See, when I bought it, my accountant suggested keeping it in my name for tax purposes, something about gift taxes and depreciation that made my head spin. Henry didn't mind because the insurance was cheaper under my policy anyway, given my perfect driving record and his 2 speeding tickets. So legally, technically, that beautiful machine was still mine. Henry had possession, he had the keys, he had the right to drive it, but the title? That was sitting in my safe deposit box with Victor Morrison. printed clearly on the owner line. A detail my son seemed to have forgotten when he was shopping around for buyers. I pulled up social media on my phone, something Charlotte taught me to do last summer, and found Henry's profile. There it was, posted just 3 weeks ago. A photo of him standing next to the Rolls-Royce with the caption, "Success is the best revenge." No mention of dear old Dad, who made that success symbol possible. In fact, scrolling through months of posts, you'd never know I existed at all. There were pictures with Amanda's parents at restaurants, at the kids' games, at birthday parties. Harold and Patricia, the immediate family who deserved a seat at Christmas Eve dinner. I found one photo from 6 months ago where I was actually in it, way in the back at Charlotte's birthday party, partially cut off like someone had tried to crop me out but didn't quite finish the job. Then I remembered something Henry had said during that phone call about me not driving much anymore. It stuck with me because it was such a strange thing to bring up. But now, looking at the bigger picture, it made sense. If I wasn't driving much, then the Rolls-Royce sitting in his driveway was just being wasted on an old man who gave it to him, right? Better to convert it to cash for something useful, like impressing Amanda's friends with a beach house. Was I being paranoid? Maybe. But then I thought about Thanksgiving. How Henry had asked about my will out of nowhere, just to make sure everything was in order. I thought about how Amanda suddenly became interested in my health, asking about doctor visits, medications, if I ever felt confused or forgetful. The pieces were falling into place like a jigsaw puzzle I didn't want to complete. They weren't just uninviting me from Christmas Eve. They were systematically distancing me from the family, creating a narrative where I was the elderly father who couldn't drive at night, who might be getting confused, who didn't really need that expensive car he never used. How long before Dad's not coming to Christmas became Dad's having trouble living alone, and then Dad's assets need to be managed? I know that sounds dramatic, but when you've lived as long as I have, you learn to read the signs. And all the signs were pointing to me being moved from family patriarch to family problem. That night, I sat with Martha's photo album, looking at pictures of Henry growing up. There he was at 5, missing his front teeth, grinning on the bike I taught him to ride. At 16, standing next to the used Honda I'd bought him, looking like he'd won the lottery. At 30, the day I gave him the check for his house down payment, Amanda already measuring for curtains in the background. In every photo, I saw a father who gave everything and a son who took it with a smile. But somewhere between those snapshots and now, that smile had turned into something else. Entitlement, maybe? Or just the casual cruelty of forgetting who helped you climb the ladder once you reach the top? I made a decision that would reset the balance. The kind of decision you only make once. If my son thought I was just some senile old man who could be pushed aside when convenient, he was about to learn that this old man still had some fight left. The Rolls-Royce wasn't just a car. It was $350,000 worth of respect that I'd handed over freely. And if I wasn't worthy of a seat at Christmas Eve dinner, then neither Henry nor Amanda were worthy of keeping that gift. Some might call what I was planning petty. I prefer to think of it as educational. December 22nd, 3 in the morning, and I was wide awake going through my filing cabinet like a man preparing for war. Because that's what this was, wasn't it? A war for respect, fought with memories instead of weapons. I pulled out a single manila envelope, thick with papers I'd never thought I'd need. Inside was everything that mattered, everything that proved what we both already knew, but he'd chosen to forget. The car was mine, always had been. I didn't need to read through every line again. I just needed to hold that weight in my hands, feel the heft of ownership. Martha would have shaken her head at all this, probably would have said something about boys and their toys, but this wasn't about toys anymore. This was about a son who thought his father had become invisible, disposable, optional. I sat down to write a note, just 3 sentences, because sometimes the shortest messages hit the hardest. No anger, no accusations, just facts that would speak louder than any argument we could have. Christopher was an old friend from my bowling league days who'd handled Martha's estate, and I'd called him earlier that evening just to make sure I wasn't doing something stupid. "Victor, you're covered," he'd assured me. "Just document everything and avoid any confrontation." Avoid confrontation. That was the plan, which is why I chose 3 in the morning, when Henry would be deep in his stress dreams about mortgage payments, and Amanda would be sleeping off her nightly glass or 3 of wine. I thought about the last time I'd been up at this hour. It was when Martha was sick, and I'd sit by her bedside watching her breathe, terrified each breath might be the last. Now here I was again, in the darkness, but this time watching something else die. The relationship with my son. The Honda keys felt strange in my pocket, like coins from a foreign country I'd once visited but never planned to return to. I drove my old Chevrolet to Henry's neighborhood, that pristine suburban paradise where every lawn was manicured and every driveway told a story of success. The Rolls-Royce sat in his driveway like a crown jewel, gleaming under the streetlight, looking so out of place next to Amanda's practical SUV. I sat in my car for 5 minutes, maybe more, just looking at that house I'd helped buy, with the windows I'd helped install when Henry wanted to save money on contractors. Funny how I was good enough to swing a hammer back then, but not good enough for Christmas dinner now. Through the office window, I could see a light still on, and there was Henry, hunched over his computer, probably looking at beach house listings, or calculating how much he could get for Dad's gift. Part of me, and I'm not proud of this, wanted him to come outside, wanted to see his face when he realized what was happening. But the smarter part knew that would only complicate things. So I got out quietly, walked to the Rolls-Royce with my original key, not a spare, the one I'd kept, because something in my gut told me I might need it someday. The engine purred to life, like it recognized its true owner, and for a moment I just sat there in that driver's seat, remembering the first time Henry had sat in this exact spot, tears streaming down his face, saying, "Dad, I can't believe you did this for me." "Yeah, son, neither can I." I backed out slowly. No rush, no panic, just an old man retrieving his property at an hour when the world was sleeping. I left my Honda in his driveway with the keys in the visor and my note on the dashboard. Let him drive that for a while, see how it feels to pilot something bought with my money 30 years ago instead of 2. The drive home was surreal, like I was in someone else's movie, playing a character I didn't recognize. When did I become the father who had to take back gifts? When did my son become someone I needed legal protection from? By 7 that morning, my phone was having a seizure. 31 missed calls, 15 text messages, 7 voicemails, all from Henry. I listened to them in order, like watching a man go through the stages of grief in real time. First, confusion. "Dad, did you take the car? Is this some kind of joke?" Then anger. "How dare you come onto my property like a thief in the night?" But then something shifted in the 4th message. His voice cracked. "Dad, I saw the Honda. Mom's Honda. I remember learning to drive in that thing." There was a pause, like he was fighting something. Why does this feel so wrong? The 5th message was bargaining. "Dad, please, let's talk about this like adults." The 6th was quieter. "I drove Charlotte to school in the Honda today. She asked me why Grandpa was angry. I didn't know what to tell her because I think I know why." And finally, desperation mixed with something else. Maybe shame. "Dad, you don't understand what you've done. Amanda is going ballistic. The neighbors are asking questions, but that's not... I keep thinking about Mom. What she'd say about all this. Please, just call me back." Amanda called next, from her own phone, her voice shaking with rage. "You're destroying this family over your pride, Victor. Is this what Martha would have wanted?" Now that was low, bringing Martha into this. Martha would have been heartbroken to see her son treating his father like an unwanted obligation. That's what Martha would have thought. "This family was destroyed when you decided I wasn't immediate enough to celebrate Christmas Eve with," I told her. "I'm just adjusting my gift giving accordingly." She hung up on me, which was fine. I'd said what needed saying. The neighbors would definitely be talking now, wondering why the Rolls-Royce vanished overnight, why there was a beat-up Honda in its place. Good. Let Henry explain to his coffee club friends how his mean old father took back the toy because he wasn't playing nice. I spent the rest of that day doing normal things, grocery shopping, paying bills, acting like I hadn't just declared war on my only son. But that evening, as I was heating up leftover soup that Martha used to make better, my phone buzzed with a text that changed everything. It was from Charlotte, my 16-year-old granddaughter, and all it said was, "Grandpa, can we talk? Not at home? Starbucks on 5th Street tomorrow at 10? Now, Charlotte had always been special to me. Maybe because she had Martha's eyes, or maybe because she was the only one in that family who still called just to chat, not to ask for something. But this message felt different, felt urgent in a way that made my chest tight. "Of course, sweetheart," I texted back. "I'll be there." Whatever Charlotte had to tell me, I had a feeling it was going to shine a light on things I wasn't sure I wanted to see. Charlotte was already waiting when I walked into that Starbucks, sitting in the corner booth like she was hiding from someone, wearing one of those oversized hoodies kids like these days. When she looked up and saw me, her face did something complicated. Relief mixed with worry, mixed with something that looked like anger. She had Martha's eyes, all right. That same green fire that could see through nonsense and call it what it was. "Grandpa," she said, standing to hug me, and I could feel her trembling a little. Whatever this was about, it was big enough to scare a kid who usually wasn't scared of anything. We got our coffees and sat back down, and for a moment neither of us said anything. Then Charlotte pulled out her phone, looked around to make sure nobody was listening, and showed me her screen. "Grandpa, I took pictures of these before Mom could hide them." On her phone were photos of brochures, glossy ones with smiling seniors playing golf and eating in fancy dining rooms. Sunset Gardens Senior Community, where life begins again. I looked at those brochures, then at Charlotte, then back at the brochures. "Your parents are planning a vacation?" I asked, though I knew that wasn't it. "Grandpa, they're planning to put you there. I heard them talking with Aunt Jessica about it last week. They think you can't live alone anymore." "Can't live alone?" "I've been living alone for 5 years since Martha passed. Managing just fine, thank you very much. I pay my bills, maintain my house, cook my meals, even host poker night once a month for the guys. But suddenly I can't live alone?" "There's more," Charlotte said, and her voice got quiet. "They've been documenting things, Grandpa, like when you forgot to come to my school play last month." I didn't forget that play. They told me the wrong date, said it was Thursday when it was Tuesday, and when you got confused at Thanksgiving. Confused? I asked where the cranberry sauce was because Amanda moved it from where Martha always put it. That's not confusion. That's tradition. They're building a case, Grandpa. Mom said once they sell your house, it'll cover the costs for the fancy assisted living place and leave enough for the beach house they want. My house. The house I'd built with my own hands, where I'd raised Henry, where Martha took her last breath holding my hand. They were already dividing up the proceeds like I was already gone. "Charlotte, honey, why are you telling me this?" I asked, though I was grateful she was. She looked me straight in the eye, and for a second I saw Martha sitting there, that same determined set to her jaw. "Because it's wrong, Grandpa. You gave Dad everything. The business loan he never paid back, the house down payment, that stupid car, and now they want to lock you away so they can take the rest? No, that's not happening." She pulled out a flash drive from her pocket, one of those tiny things that apparently hold the whole world now. "I recorded them, Grandpa. Last week's Zoom call with some lawyer named Howard. They don't know I did it." She slid the flash drive across the table, like we were spies exchanging state secrets. They talked about mental capacity evaluations, about power of attorney, about how the thing with the car proves you're becoming irrational. Irrational? Taking back my own property is irrational? Dad actually pushed back a little, Charlotte continued, and I could hear something in her voice, like she wanted me to know Henry wasn't completely lost. "He said you were still sharp, that this felt wrong, but Mom shut him down hard. Told him it was your future or theirs. My future or theirs. Like it was a zero-sum game where my existence meant their failure." "Charlotte, does your father know you're here?" I asked. She shook her head. "He's been weird lately, Grandpa. I catch him looking at your old photos when Mom's not around. Yesterday I heard him crying in his office. He keeps saying he's drowning, that the business expansion was a mistake. So there it was, another piece of the puzzle. Henry wasn't just greedy. He was desperate. The successful businessman with the Rolls-Royce and the perfect suburban life was drowning in debt. And instead of asking his father for help like a man, he was letting his wife convince him to take what he needed through legal manipulation. "Grandpa, there's something else," Charlotte said, and she looked genuinely scared now. "In the recording, the lawyer mentioned something about Christmas. He said getting you excluded from family events helps establish a pattern of decline, shows you're too difficult to have around. Too difficult. 42 years of Christmas Eve, and suddenly I'm too difficult. The uninvitation wasn't just cruel. It was calculated, strategic, a chess move in a game I didn't know I was playing. I looked at this brave kid, my granddaughter, who was risking her relationship with her parents to protect me, and felt something I hadn't felt in years. Not anger, not hurt, but determination. "Charlotte, thank you for this. You're a lot like your grandmother, you know that." She smiled then. A real smile. "Grandma would have burned the whole thing down if someone tried this with you." Yes, she would have. Martha didn't suffer fools or tolerate injustice, especially when it came to family. "What are you going to do, Grandpa?" Charlotte asked. I picked up the flash drive, tucked it safely in my pocket. "I'm going to listen to this recording, talk to my lawyer, and make sure your parents understand that this old man isn't going anywhere. He doesn't want to go." We finished our coffees, and I drove Charlotte back toward her neighborhood, dropping her a few blocks away so nobody would see us together. Before she got out, she turned to me. "Grandpa, I love you. Don't let them win. Don't let them win." From the mouths of babes, as Martha used to say. Charlotte and I sat in my car in the parking lot of a strip mall, my laptop balanced on the center console, both of us leaning in to hear the recording like conspirators planning a revolution, which I suppose we were, in a way. The audio was crystal clear. Charlotte had positioned her phone perfectly during that Zoom call, and what I heard made my blood run cold and hot at the same time. Amanda's voice came through first, but it wasn't the fake, sweet tone I expected. She sounded exhausted, desperate even. "Howard, we need to move faster on this. The second mortgage payment is overdue, Charlotte's college is in 3 years, and Henry's business is bleeding money. Victor took the car back, which honestly might work in our favor. It shows erratic behavior, wouldn't you say?" The lawyer, this Howard character, cleared his throat before responding. "It certainly helps establish a pattern, Amanda. But are you certain about this path? Once we start, there's no going back." Then I heard Henry's voice, and it broke something in me because he sounded like a man drowning. "Amanda, please, he's still my father. Remember when he stayed up all night helping me with that science project in 7th grade? When Mom died, he held this family together. Maybe we should just ask him for help directly." There was a sharp intake of breath, then Amanda's voice, cracking slightly. "Ask him? Henry, we've maxed out everything. My parents already think I'm a failure for marrying someone who can't provide. If they find out we need your father's money, I'll never hear the end of it. At least if he's in Sunset Gardens, we can say we're caring for him, not begging from him." So there it was, pride mixed with desperation. Not just greed. "The house alone is worth $700,000, Amanda continued, and I could hear papers shuffling. "We're $40,000 behind, Henry. 40! That's Charlotte's entire college fund gone if we don't do something." The lawyer spoke again, his voice uncomfortable now. "Let's be clear about what you're asking me to do here." But before he could continue, Henry interrupted, stronger this time. "I can't do this to him at Christmas, Amanda. It's Mom's favorite holiday. He still makes her cranberry sauce exactly the way she did. Measures the sugar 3 times because that's what she always did." There was a long pause. Then Amanda's voice, barely a whisper. "Then when, Henry? When we lose the house? When Charlotte has to go to community college because we couldn't afford better? Your father is one man sitting on more wealth than he'll ever use, while his own grandchildren's futures hang by a thread." I wanted to scream at the laptop that all they had to do was ask, just ask, and I would have helped. But pride is a funny thing. It makes beggars act like thieves. Charlotte paused the recording and looked at me with tears in her eyes. "Grandpa, Mom's not evil. She's just scared. Dad cries at night sometimes, goes through old photo albums of you and Grandma. I found him once holding your old tools from the garage, the ones you guys used to build my treehouse. This was new information, and it changed things. Not the betrayal, but the shape of it. My son wasn't a monster. He was a broken man, married to a desperate woman, both of them too proud to admit they were drowning. There's more, Grandpa, Charlotte said, wiping her eyes. Listen to this part. She hit play again, and now they were discussing timing, but Henry interrupted mid-sentence. Wait, I need to say something. If we do this, if we really do this, I want him to know I'm sorry. Somehow, someday, I need him to know. Don't you dare speak for my mother, Henry had said in the recording when Amanda mentioned Martha would understand. There was real anger there. Protective anger, the kind I hadn't heard from him in years. The recording went quiet, except for what sounded like crying. Amanda or Henry, I couldn't tell. Maybe both. Then Howard's voice. Professional, but uncomfortable. Perhaps we should reconvene when emotions aren't so high. This is a major decision that affects everyone. But Amanda's voice came back. Steel underneath the tears. We don't have time for emotions, Howard. It's now or never. Henry, decide. Your father or your family's future. Turn it off, I said. And Charlotte did. We sat in silence for a moment, both of us processing what we'd heard. My son wasn't evil. He was broken. Amanda wasn't a monster. She was a woman watching her life crumble while her in-laws' wealth sat untouchable. But understanding their pain didn't erase their betrayal. It just made it hurt differently, deeper somehow, because they'd chosen their pride over asking for help. Grandpa, what are you thinking? Charlotte asked carefully. I started the car, my hands steadier than I expected. I'm thinking about your grandmother, I said. She always told me that the hardest thing about being a parent isn't the sacrifices you make. It's watching your children become people you don't recognize. I drove Charlotte back toward her neighborhood, dropping her a few blocks away so nobody would see us together. Then I went straight to Christopher's house, not his office, because some conversations need to happen between friends, not lawyer and client. He was in his garage, working on that old Mustang he'd been restoring since his wife died. Same way I kept Martha's garden alive. Men and their grief projects. Chris, I said, handing him the flash drive. I need you to hear this. Not as my lawyer. As my friend. We sat on paint buckets in his garage, listening to my son plan my disposal. And when it was over, Christopher just shook his head. Victor, this is serious. But more than that, it's sad. That boy loved you once. He still does, I said. That's what makes it worse. He's choosing to do this anyway. Christopher stood up, wiped his hands on an old rag, the same gesture I'd seen him make 100 times when he was thinking hard. We can stop them, you know? One document, properly filed, and they can't touch you. He pulled out a single folder from his workbench, already prepared because he knew me well enough to see this coming. But Victor, once we do this, once we make it legal and public, there's no going back to Sunday dinners and birthday cards. I thought about Martha again, about what she'd want. There already are no Sunday dinners, Chris. Haven't been for months. He nodded, understanding. Then we protect you first, worry about reconciliation later. As I left his garage, Christopher called after me. Victor? That Christmas Eve dinner they uninvited you from? Show up anyway. With me. And that recording. I turned back to look at him. That's ambush, Chris. He smiled. But it wasn't a happy smile. No, that's justice with witnesses. Turn it off, I said. And Charlotte did. We sat in silence for a moment, both of us processing what we'd heard. My son, the boy I'd taught to ride a bike, to throw a baseball, to be a man, was letting his wife orchestrate my removal from my own life. But you know what hurt most? It wasn't the betrayal or the greed. It was how easy it seemed for them, like I was a problem to be solved, not a person to be loved. Grandpa, I'm sorry, Charlotte said, and she was crying now. Don't apologize, sweetheart. You did the right thing. I started the car, dropped Charlotte off, and drove straight to Christopher's office. He was technically retired, but still kept office hours for old clients and older friends. Christopher listened to the recording with his lawyer face on. No expression. just taking notes in that legal pad he'd probably had since the 80s. When it finished, he set down his pen and looked at me over his reading glasses. "Victor, this is conspiracy to commit elder abuse. It's criminal, not just civil. Criminal. My son could go to jail for this." The thought made me sick, but not as sick as the thought of ending up in Sunset Gardens while Amanda decorated my house for her new life. "What do I do, Chris?" He leaned back in his chair, the same one he'd sat in when we handled Martha's will. "First, we file a preemptive restraining order. They can't petition for guardianship if they can't come near you. Second, we document your mental capacity officially. I know a psychiatrist who can evaluate you tomorrow, create a legal record that you're completely competent." "And then?" I asked. Christopher smiled, and it wasn't a nice smile. "Then we attend Christmas Eve dinner." I stared at him. "But I wasn't invited." "Victor, possession is 9/10 of the law. But the 10th is showing up anyway with a lawyer and a recording that could destroy them." He was right, of course. They wanted to paint me as weak, confused, incompetent. What better way to shatter that narrative than showing up at their door, clear-minded and prepared for war? "There's something else," Christopher said. "That bank manager who blocked their attempt to access your accounts? Harrison? He called me. Apparently Henry tried again yesterday, right after you took the car. Harrison wants to know if you want to press charges." Press charges? Against my own son? How did it come to this? But then I thought about Martha, what she would say. She'd probably quote that thing she always said when Henry was young and acting up. "Sometimes, Victor, love means letting them face consequences." She was talking about taking away his Nintendo when he didn't do homework, not criminal charges, but the principle stood. If I let this go, if I rolled over and played dead, I wouldn't just lose my house and my dignity. I'd lose Charlotte's respect, and that was worth more than all of it. "Not yet," I told Christopher. "Let's see how Christmas Eve plays out first." He nodded, understanding. We weren't just planning a confrontation. We were planning a revelation, and those always played better with an audience. Christmas Eve arrived cold and clear, the kind of night Martha used to say was perfect for making memories. I dressed carefully in the sweater she'd knitted me our last Christmas together, the green one, with the ridiculous reindeer that she said brought out my eyes. Christopher met me in my driveway at 5:30, looking like somebody's grandfather in his Christmas tie, not like a retired attorney about to help me reclaim my dignity. In my hands, I carried 2 boxes wrapped in the paper Martha had saved from years ago, because she never threw away good wrapping paper. One box held actual presents for the grandkids, something their parents couldn't touch or sell. The other box, well, that one held the truth, and truth has a way of being the most devastating gift of all. "You ready for this, Victor?" Christopher asked, as we sat in his car outside Henry's house. The windows glowed warm with Christmas lights, and I could see shadows moving inside, the immediate family having their intimate dinner. "I've been ready since I heard that recording," I said, though my hands were shaking a little, not from fear or age, but from adrenaline mixed with sorrow. How many Christmas Eves had I spent in that house, carving turkey, pouring wine, telling the same stories about Martha that made everyone laugh. Now I was walking in uninvited, like a ghost at my own funeral. We walked to the door, and I didn't knock. A man doesn't knock on the door of traditions he created, especially not on Christmas Eve. Amanda answered, her face cycling through expressions like a slot machine before landing on forced politeness. "Victor! And Christopher? We weren't expecting you. Henry said you understood about coming tomorrow instead." "Plans change, Amanda," I said, walking past her into the living room where everyone was gathered. The dining table was set for 8, not 7, which meant they'd filled my spot already. Harold and Patricia, Amanda's parents, sat where Martha and I used to sit, in the chairs I'd bought for our 40th anniversary. They looked uncomfortable, like they knew something was off but couldn't place it. Henry stood up when he saw me, his face pale, his hands actually trembling. "Dad, what are you doing here?" And for just a second, I saw my little boy again, the one who used to wait up for me to read him bedtime stories, scared but trying to be brave. I came to give my family their Christmas presents, I said, setting both boxes on the coffee table that I'd helped Henry refinish when they first moved in. Since everyone important is here, including Harold and Patricia, this seems like perfect timing. Charlotte was trying not to smile from her spot by the fireplace, and I gave her the tiniest wink. She'd been brave enough to stand up for what was right. The least I could do was follow her example. Victor, this is inappropriate, Amanda started, but Christopher stepped forward. Actually, Amanda, what's inappropriate is planning to steal from someone while accepting their gifts. The room went silent except for the Christmas music playing softly from the speakers. Bing Crosby dreaming of a white Christmas while a family nightmare unfolded in real time. I opened the first box, pulled out envelopes with the kids' names. Charlotte, James, these are for your education. Only you can access them when you're ready. Charlotte took hers with tears in her eyes, understanding what this meant. James, 12, and confused, just held his envelope like it might explode. Then I opened the second box, and instead of pulling out stacks of papers, I simply held up one photo, the one from 2 Thanksgivings ago where Henry was toasting with the Rolls-Royce keys, saying, "To Dad, who made everything possible." Remember this, Henry? I asked. Remember what you said? His face crumbled. Dad, please. But I wasn't done. I pulled out a single sheet of paper, held it up so everyone could see the letterhead. Sunset Gardens, Senior Community. Harold, Amanda's father, stood up slowly, his face changing from confusion to something darker. What the hell is going on here? I looked at him, this man who'd taken my seat at the table, and for a moment I felt sorry for him. Your daughter and my son have been planning to have me declared incompetent so they can take my house and assets. But you probably didn't know that, did you? Patricia gasped. Actually gasped. Like someone had slapped her. Amanda, is this true? Amanda's face was red now, but not just with anger. I saw shame there, too. A daughter caught failing in front of parents she'd tried so hard to impress. You don't understand the pressure we've been under. Daddy, we're about to lose everything. Henry's business is failing, we're drowning, and Victor has all this money just sitting there while we suffer. Christopher stepped forward with his phone, but Amanda lunged for it. No, you can't do this. Not in front of everyone. Henry actually stood up then, gently but firmly holding Amanda back. Stop, Amanda. Just stop. It's over. His voice was broken but clear, and in that moment I saw Martha in him. That same moment of clarity she'd have when enough was enough. Christopher looked at me, and I nodded. The recording began to play, filling their perfect living room with the truth. You could have heard a pin drop as Amanda's voice talked about selling my house. But what hit harder was when her voice cracked, talking about her parents thinking she was a failure. When Henry's voice played, broken and lost, saying he was failing without his mother, I saw Charlotte crying quietly by the fireplace. Even Harold's expression softened slightly when he heard his daughter's desperation, though it hardened again at the calculation of it all. When the recording ended, Harold stood up and walked over to Amanda. We're leaving, Patricia, now. Daddy, wait. You don't understand the context. But Harold wasn't listening anymore. He looked at me with something like shame in his eyes. Victor, I'm sorry. We didn't know. If we had... He didn't finish, just guided his wife toward the door. The neighbors Henry had invited, the Johnsons from 2 doors down, were already backing toward the exit, Mrs. Johnson whispering something about needing to check on their cat. In minutes, the intimate family gathering had emptied out, leaving just the truth and the people who had to live with it. You've ruined everything! Amanda screamed, actually screamed, like a child having a tantrum. You vindictive old man! No, Amanda, I said, and I was surprised how calm I felt. You ruined everything when you decided I was an asset to liquidate instead of a father to love. Henry finally looked up at me, tears streaming down his face. Dad, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. The business is failing. We're drowning in debt. Amanda said this was the only way. There's always another way, son. It's called asking for help. I turned to leave, then remembered one more thing. Oh, and the Rolls-Royce? It's being donated to charity. The Veterans Foundation is auctioning it next month. At least some good will come from my gift. Charlotte stood up then, walked over to me. "Grandpa, can I come with you?" Amanda grabbed her arm. "You're not going anywhere, young lady." But Charlotte pulled free, her Martha eyes blazing. "Yes, I am. I'm going with the only person in this room who hasn't lied to me." And just like that, my granddaughter chose truth over comfort, love over convenience. You could have heard a pin drop as Amanda's voice filled the room talking about selling my house, about 3 incidents being enough, about doing me a favor. Henry sank into his chair as his own voice played. Weak, and going along with it all. When it got to the part about Christmas being perfect for establishing my decline, Harold stood up and walked over to Amanda. "We're leaving, Patricia. Now!" "Daddy, wait! You don't understand the pressure we've been under." But Harold wasn't listening anymore. He looked at me with something like shame in his eyes. "Victor, I'm sorry. We didn't know." They left, Patricia crying, Harold's jaw set in a line that said his daughter would be hearing about this for years. The neighbors Henry had invited, the Johnsons from 2 doors down, were already backing toward the door, Mrs. Johnson whispering something about needing to check on their cat. In minutes, the intimate family gathering had emptied out, leaving just Henry, Amanda, the kids, Christopher, and me. "You've ruined everything!" Amanda screamed. Actually screamed, like a child having a tantrum. "You vindictive old man!" "No, Amanda," I said, and I was surprised how calm I felt. "You ruined everything when you decided I was a problem to be solved instead of a father to be respected." Henry finally looked up at me, and there were tears on his face. "Dad, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. The business is failing. We're drowning in debt." Amanda said this was the only way. "There's always another way, son. You could have asked for help. I would have given it freely, like I always have." I turned to leave, then remembered one more thing. "Oh, and the Rolls-Royce? I'm donating it to charity. The Veterans Foundation is auctioning it off next month. Should raise about $400,000. At least some good will come from my gift." Charlotte stood up then, walked over to me. "Grandpa, can I come with you?" Amanda grabbed her arm. "You're not going anywhere, young lady." Christopher cleared his throat. "Actually, Amanda, at 16, Charlotte can choose where to spend Christmas. And given what we've just heard, any court would be very interested in her preferences." Charlotte pulled free, went to pack a bag. While we waited, nobody spoke. The Christmas music kept playing. Now it was silent night, and the irony wasn't lost on anyone. Charlotte and I left then, driving back to my house in Christopher's car while snow started to fall, just like in those Christmas movies Martha loved. We spent the evening making Martha's recipes from her old book, Charlotte laughing at my stories about her grandmother, both of us pretending our hearts weren't broken. The next morning, Christmas Day, we had breakfast, just the 2 of us, and Charlotte gave me a present she'd hidden in her bag. It was a photo album she'd made, filled with pictures of Martha and me that she'd saved from Amanda's various purges over the years. Around noon, there was a knock at the door. I opened it to find Henry standing there, alone, holding a pie that looked like it had been in a fight and lost. I looked at this man who was my son, who'd hurt me deeper than I thought possible, who'd chosen greed over love, and was now standing on my porch with a burnt apple pie and red eyes. Martha always said redemption wasn't just possible, it was necessary. We sat at my kitchen table, the 3 of us, eating terrible pie, and not talking about what needed talking about. Finally, Henry pulled an envelope from his pocket. "I went to the bank this morning. This is a cashier's check for $30,000. It's everything Amanda and I have saved. For the car, to show you I'm serious about making this right." I looked at that check, at my son's shaking hands, at Charlotte watching us both with those Martha eyes. "Keep it," I said. "Use it to save your business. But Henry, you need to decide who you want to be. The man your mother raised or the man Amanda is turning you into." He nodded, understanding. "Amanda moved back to her parents last night. She says I'm weak, that I chose my father over our future." "You chose decency over theft, son. That's not a weakness." We finished the pie, every burnt bite of it, and when Henry left, he hugged me for the first time in 2 years. 3 days later, Christopher called. The Rolls-Royce auction ended. $420,000 to a collector in California. The Veterans Foundation wants to thank you personally. No need, I said. Just make sure it helps someone who actually served something greater than themselves. Charlotte stayed with me through New Year's. And on New Year's Eve, as we watched fireworks from the deck Martha and I had built, she showed me one more thing. A letter in Martha's handwriting, one Charlotte had found hidden in an old cookbook. Victor, it read, if you're reading this, things have probably gotten complicated with Henry. He's our son, and I love him, but he's weak where you're strong, and greedy where you're generous. Don't give up on him, but don't let him destroy you either. Stand firm, my love. Our granddaughter will need to see what strength looks like. All my love, Martha. I folded that letter carefully, put it in my wallet next to her picture. Charlotte raised her hot chocolate in a toast. To Grandma, she said. To Martha, I agreed. And to second chances. And to grandpas who know when to take back the keys, she added with a grin. My phone buzzed then. A text from Henry. Dad, can you teach me to be the man you are? I showed it to Charlotte, who smiled. What will you tell him? She asked. I thought for a moment, then typed back. No, son, but I can teach you to be the man you're meant to be. Sunday dinner, 4 o'clock. Bring dessert. Try not to burn it. Sometimes the greatest gift you can give your family isn't money or cars or houses. It's the strength to say no, the wisdom to see truth, and the courage to demand the respect you've earned. Martha always said I was too soft. Turns out, even rolls of steel can bend, but they don't break. And sometimes, just sometimes, they can help rebuild what seemed lost forever. If you've made it this far, you understand what it's like to fight for respect in your own family. Please hit the subscribe button so you don't miss more stories like this, and drop a comment below telling me what you would have done with that Rolls-Royce.